Before we begin, take a deep breath and let the noise of the day slowly fade. Unclench your jaw, soften your eyes, and let the weight of modern life melt away. Tonight, we're not chasing action or drama. We're wandering into the forgotten corridors of boring history, where medieval echoes linger and dark tales unfold like fading ink on parchment. Welcome to Midnight Sleepless, a resting place for tired minds, where the Middle Ages, ancient empires, and strange, dark history stories drift by like soft clouds. Here, knights, castles, and quiet empires return, not with a roar, but with a whisper. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there? And if you enjoyed these slow, sleepy journeys through medieval times, boring facts, and forgotten worlds, a gentle tap on the subscribe button helps keep this calm storytelling alive. Now, he shows you where to mark today's measurement. You take the reed pen he offers, dip it into the ink pot, and write slowly. Your character's narrow and slightly crooked, but legible. This is more than just numbers. It's memory, record, responsibility. You feel it settle in your chest like a soft weight, neither burden nor pride, but something quieter, something lasting. Later, back near your home, your mother has prepared a simple meal: lentils with coriander, leftover bread soaked in oil, and a handful of pickled radish. The flavors are strong and grounding. You eat in silence beside your father. Your hands smell faintly of silt and stone. You do not wash them yet. There's comfort in the lingering trace of your day, when the sun finally drops below the date palms, and the canal begins to reflect stars instead of sky. You sit near the water's edge, alone for a while. The frogs begin their chorus. A soft wind passes through the reeds. The night does not rush upon the land. It glides in, calm and patient. You watch the water move, dark and steady. It flows without effort, without voice, yet it shapes everything. And in that moment, beneath the sky turning to ink and a breeze that smells faintly of jasmine and clay, you think, if you guide the water well, does it begin to remember you in return? The heat slips away in silence, and the breeze off the river carries with it the cool breath of distant waters. Stars emerge, not all at once, but gradually. First one, then a soft cluster, then the wider net of constellations that arc gently over the sleeping fields. The canal reflects them in fragments, broken by reeds and ripples, but still glimmering, still constant dot. You sit with your father again, this time not for work, but in rest. A woven mat is spread over the compacted earth, and you both share the end of a meal-sweet beer, a wedge of melon, and a heel of barley bread. There are no words spoken. The silence is not awkward, but understood. It has long been part of the rhythm between you, around you. The land is quiet, but alive. Insects chirp from their hiding places beneath the leaves. A bullfrog sounds its call from somewhere near the bank. Farther off, in the workers' village, a low drumbeat begins a lullaby or a private ritual. You cannot tell. The sound is soft and slow, rising and falling like the breath of the land itself. Your father leans back slightly, eyes half closed. His hands rest on his knees, palms up, fingers still calloused and worn from years of gripping wood, stone, and rope. You glance at your own hands, smaller, younger, but beginning to take the same shape, not from blood, but from action, from repetition, from quiet imitation. The canal beside you flows steadily on, its current neither hurried nor still. You watch it as though it might speak. There is a language in waterway. It presses against the banks. It's the patterns it makes in the silt, the swirl where reeds interrupt its path. Your father understands this language. Someday, so will you, Dot. And yet, the path ahead is not marked. No ceremony will announce your inheritance of this task. There's no scroll to sign, no witness to the passing of responsibility. It will happen as this day did naturally, softly, one task at a time, until one morning. The gate will stick, and you will be the one to fix it without asking. You rise and walk the narrow track toward the edge of the property. The moon is higher. Now, it's light, pale, and even. The irrigation channels lie like dark veins across the earth, their borders glowing faintly where the water touches sand. You stop to check the small stone barrier you repaired earlier. It holds. There is satisfaction. In that dot, you sit near the edge and let your fingers trail lightly through the water. It is cooler than you expect, sliding around your hand with a silk-like softness. You feel the current nudge your fingers, and you let them follow for a moment before pulling them back. The scent of wet reeds rises again, sweet and green, laced with the faint musk of damp earth. This life is not filled with spectacle. There are no crowds to watch, no accolades to win. But in this quiet labor, there is a kind of peace. The fields live because of hands like yours. The grain grows. The people eat. The river moves on. You wonder, just for a moment, how many others along the Nile are doing the same. How many hands open the floodgates each morning? How many feet press into the canal banks? How many lives are quietly bent to the rhythm of the water? You will never meet them, but they exist. Their shadows stretch across other fields. Their footprints mirror your own. Perhaps this, too, is a kind of kinship. Returning home, the oil lamp still glows beside the door. Inside, your mother hums softly as she folds the last of the linen. The scent of crushed herbs lingers in the room, lavender, mint, a touch of sweet marjoram. You lie down on your mat and listen. The wind stirs, the roof reeds gently, and the canal murmurs just beyond the wall. Your eyes begin to close, not from exhaustion, but from calm. The day has shaped itself around you like a worn tunic, familiar, useful, unadorned. You think of the tasks ahead, the ones not yet given, the paths not yet walked, and as your breath slows, carried on the rhythm of the river's flow, you think one last thought, not loud, not urgent, just steady. In a world shaped by water, perhaps it is enough to be the one who guides its path. In the northern reaches of early medieval Scandinavia, where twilight lingers long after noon and snow falls as softly as breath, warmth was not merely a comfort, it was a craft. It was something shaped by hand, grown from sheep and tree, carried in rituals, and passed down through the worn fingers of ancestors. In the long winters, when the earth seemed to sleep beneath a blanket of white, and the wind howled low like a memory, warmth was made slowly, layer by careful layer. You find yourself, in the middle of this winter world, standing at the threshold of a longhouse with smoke curling upward from the peak of the roof. Your boots press into the snow, which crunches faintly beneath your step, dry and powdery from the long frost. The cold kisses your cheeks, the slow sting that quickly softens as you step inside. The longhouse greets you, not with heat, but with quiet warmth, the steady hum of breath, ember, and wool. It is not hot here. It is never hot, but the cold no longer bites. It simply lingers at the edges, repelled by layers both visible and unseen. Wool, spun in slow circles through the darker seasons, wraps around nearly every figure you see. A woman mending a sleeve near the hearth is cloaked in a deep gray shawl, its fringe singed faintly from a spark some weeks ago. A boy, perhaps 7, tugs at a tunic, thick with lanolin, its surface shiny in patches where it has been worn smooth. Even the dog, curled in a heap near the fire, rests against a rug made from the wool of last summer's shearing. Warmth here is woven, but it begins not at the spindle or the loom. It begins outside, in the fields now buried in snow where the sheep once grazed under the watchful eye of a boy with a horn and a quiet stride. The sheep, hardy and small, carried double-layered fleece, a coarse outer coat and a softer underlayer. In summer, Their wool was sheared by hand, using blades sharpened with whetstones and patience. The fleece was sorted, cleaned with snow and cold water, and set to dry in baskets lined with bark. The spinning would wait for winter, when hands were idle and light was low, as you walked slowly deeper into the longhouse. Your fingers brushed the wooden walls, smooth from touch, darkened by years of smoke. Hooks hold cloaks and mittens. On one, a thick cap made from felted wool, stitched with a simple pattern of stars in dyed thread. Swings gently as the door creaks closed behind you. The scent here is layered: peat smoke, dry thyme, wet wool, and the faint tang of pine resin rubbed into tools to protect them from cracking in the cold. In the far corner, tucked between bundles of dried herbs and spare kindling, is a chest. Its hinges are leather, its surface carved with rings and lines protection symbols, worn smooth by generations of hands. Inside are the deeper layers: fur-lined trousers, sealskin boots, woolen socks, each pair mismatched but mended carefully. These are not worn every day. They are for travel, for when a man must leave the warmth of the house to fish at the river or check a trapline beyond the ridge. Wood, too, plays its quiet role. Along the wall, neatly stacked, are planks of birch, ash, and pine, split and aged through the summer. They are chosen not for their heat alone, but for their burn-quality pine for light, birch for a quick flame, ash for long-lasting coals. Fire, here, is not made in bursts, tid, coaxed. It must never go out entirely. A longhouse without fire is not only cold, it is adrift. The hearth, wide and low, is ringed with stones, darkened by years of smoke. Hanging above it is a clay pot, suspended from a wrought iron hook. Thin broth simmers inside, giving off small bubbles and a faint smell of onion and turnip. Next to it, a stone slab stays warm from earlier bread baking, now radiating a low heat that warms the hands of an old man seated beside it. Wool mittens push down to his wrists as he holds a carved wooden cup between his palms. Heat is shared. In silence, no one speaks loudly. No one wastes warmth by rising too quickly or opening the door wide. The architecture itself is designed to hold heat not in great quantities, but in manageable stillness. Walls are packed with straw and mud, floors lined with woven mats, ceilings low to trap the rising warmth. The thatch above is thick, pressed with snow that serves as insulation more than an obstacle. The windows, few and small, are covered with stretched bladders or horn to let light filter through without letting cold seep in. Even the bodies within the space are part of the design. People sleep close, not always for affection, but for survival. Children between parents, elders near the fire. When one moves, the others adjust, fitting together like folded cloth, conserving every ounce of warmth. Clothing is never removed fully, not in this season. People sleep in shifts, in partial dress, wrapping themselves in cloaks that double as bedding. Boots are set near the fire, but never too close, lest they crack. Gloves are turned inside out to dry. Everything is part of the quiet system of preservation. You sit now near the hearth, a carved cup of warm meat in your hands. The taste is faint honeyed, but sharp at the edges, the flavor of fermented herbs and thyme. It warms you, not like fire, but like memory. Around you, the longhouse settles again, voices fading into the folds of wool and the low rhythm of breath. There is no single invention here that creates warmth. It is a web of wool, of wood, of fire, of presence. Each strand is woven with intention. Each habit passes quietly from one generation to the next, until the act of keeping warm becomes not something you do, but something you are part of. And as you lean back, wrapped in the same kind of cloak once worn by a woman who sang to her child 1,000 winters ago, you may wonder how many small acts, repeated with care, kept the cold at bay year after year, in this long, unbroken chain of human warmth. Warmth in a Viking winter was never taken for granted. It was planned for, earned, and guarded like grain. And while the fire at the heart of the longhouse offered its red glow faithfully, it was the quiet layers of human ingenuities, some woven, some carved, some simply understood, that made life in the north not only endurable, but whole. The act of spinning wool was as constant as breathing. It was not a chore, it was a presence, always near, always necessary. It's a drop spindle hung from belts or rested in aprons, ready to be turned between the fingers during a lull in conversation or while watching soup simmer. Even the youngest girls learned early how to twist raw fleece into thread, soft and tight. The sound of spinning light, rhythmic, like the whisper of wind against bark, was a part of daily life. Once spun, the yarn was dyed using whatever the summer had offered: birch leaves for pale gold, alder bark for rust red, lichen for dusty green, and iron-rich water for black. These colors, though muted, became the quiet palette of winter garments. Tunics, shawls, and undergarments all bore the subtle hues of their land, softened further by the smoky breath of the hearth. In another corner of the longhouse, a man carves a handle for fire tongs using a length of ash wood. The tool will help shift coals without disturbing the slow-burning log beneath. His knife, worn but sharp, moves with calm precision. The texture of the wood curls beneath the blade in soft, shivering ribbons that fall to the floor like thin parchment. He works in silence, seated on a fur-draped bench with a woolen cap pulled low over his ears. Wool, however, was not the only armor against the cold. Fur was prized especially from foxes, bears, or reindeer. Reindeer pelts, in particular, were used to line cloaks or sleeping mats, offering a soft, insulating layer that held heat close to the body. These pelts, taken with reverence, were tanned in the warmer months and stored in tightly wrapped bundles until winter's edge arrived. A man might wear a tunic of heavy wool, but his collar and boots would be fur-lined, stitched by hand with bone needles and sinew thread. Children wore wool tunics that hung just below the knee and often carried small pouches of down feathers or dried moss tucked into their belts, not for decoration, but to stuff into their shoes for added warmth. Their mittens were made from felted wool, sometimes layered twice, with small slits in the palms so they could slip their fingers out without removing the whole mitten. Every detail had purpose. The architecture of the longhouse itself responded to the cold with slow grace. The door faced away from prevailing winds, and its threshold was raised to keep warmth in and snow out. When opened, it was done swiftly. The person entering would press their back against the wood and close it firmly, then pause to stamp the snow from their boots before stepping further in. This quiet ritual of entry was done without instruction, taught simply by repetition and by watching. Along the ceiling beams, bunches of dried herbs and wool bundles hung like quiet companions. They were stored high, not only to keep them dry, but because warm air rose. Even the smoked meats and fish strips, dangling in pairs from twine, benefited from this logic, preserved not only by salt and smoke, but by the understanding of how heat moved in the still air. There were no thermometers, no measurements of degrees or forecasts. Cold was felt in the fingertips, read in the behavior of animals, judged by the weight of snow or the way the fire crackled. A deeper cold made the wood creak differently at night. Slightly warmer day softened the snow against the doorframe into a translucent edge. People became attuned to these changes, not because they had to be, but because the long rhythm of winter made attention a form of survival. Sometimes neighbors visited, crossing the frozen paths in pairs, their cloaks thick and fur collars pulled high. They arrived not with fanfare, but with a quiet knock or a single call of greeting. Upon entering, they would bring their own heat. With them, the cold still clinging to their cloaks, the flush of frost against their cheeks. They were offered a seat near the hearth, a shared drink, and a bowl of whatever broth was already cooking. No special meals were prepared. Sarian was built into the rhythm of life. The sense of warmth extended beyond the physical. Hospitality was a quiet commandment. Even a small space near the wall was made available for a visitor to sleep, with a spare cloak or fur pressed into their hands. Stories were shared not only for amusement, but for companionship. Tales of ancestors who crossed frozen lakes, of old gods who wrapped the earth in snow to rest it for spring, of a woman who once wove wool so fine it passed through a wedding ring, and always the fire. It was not simply fuel, it was center. People oriented their bodies, their time, even their tools around it. In the evenings, coals were arranged into a tight mound, then partially covered in ash and straw to hold their heat. A child was often given the task to check the fire first at dawn, a small ceremony with no words. Brush away the ash, blow gently, watch for the orange flicker. If it returned, the house would stir to life again. If not, it meant starting over with flint, steel, and patience. Even the word, spoken now and then during winter nights, referred not to fate as final judgment, but to a woven pathways of life and choice entangled like yarn in a basket. Warmth, too, was part of this weaving. Each act of preservation, each garment passed down, each log placed with care, these were not mere customs. They were the thread that held lives together in the deep cold dot. And as the evening light fades once more, and the longhouse folds itself again into its quiet breath, you might pause to reflect. Warmth was never just heat. It was a way of moving, of speaking, of remembering. A pattern passed from hand to hand, wool to wool, ember to ember, as the long winter stretches forward in its quiet rhythm. You come to see warmth, not as a moment, but as a mood that rests lightly across everything in the Viking home. It is not loud nor quick, it is deliberate, composed, and quietly sacred. In these longhouses, built with the wisdom of seasons and shaped by slow memory, warmth is always more than temperature. It is the presence of care. Tonight, the snow falls again, but softly, without weight. It gathers at the edges of the roof, slips into the spaces between stones outside, muffles the already muted sounds of the world beyond the longhouse walls. Inside, the fire has dimmed into a low nest of glowing coals. One log still burns gently at the side of the hearth, its bark curling inward like a sleeping creature. A single iron pot, now empty, hangs by a bent hook, swaying faintly in the upward breath of heat. Across the room, everyone has settled. Figures are bundled beneath wool, cloaks drawn to chins, boots tucked near ankles. There is no restlessness, only a slow, practiced exhale that fills the space like mist and leaves no part untouched. Even the animals, curled in pens or nestled into straw, breathe in time with the rhythm of the house. Wool garments, folded for sleep, lie at the foot of each resting place. They hold their shape faintly, like shadows of their wearers, and their fibers still carry the scent of hearth smoke and lanolin. Few pairs of mittens rest atop the logs near the door, turned inside out to dry by the dying warmth. The hands that wore them today carved wood, candid goats, and capped goats, and held the cold at bay. Now they rest, wrapped in furs, the skin creased and strong. There is no sound but the soft shuffle of someone shifting in sleep and the faint crackle of a drying log. The walls of the longhouse seem to breathe. They absorb each sigh and murmur, holding the warmth not just of fire, but of years of every winter faced, every cloak passed from mother to daughter, every bowl of stew shared by dim light. Near the rafters, where bundles of wool and herbs still hang, the air is warmest. Honey. Smoke rises slowly, bending around the beams, darkening them into deep, glistening brown. The oils of decades of firelight have seeped into every surface, preserving not just the timber, but the memory. This house does not creak in protest, it murmurs with age. It holds its silence like a prayer. Outside, the stars are barely visible through the soft curtain of falling snow. The moon casts no strong light. It doesn't need to. This is not a night for sight. It is a night for weight, for the heaviness of wool, the closeness of family, the stillness of breath beneath the cloak. There is an old story told quietly, only when the mood is right. It says that the gods gifted wool to humankind, not as wealth, but as protection, not for show, but for survival. They taught people not only to shear the sheep, but to spin, to weave, and to layer. They taught that warmth was not something given, but something made with patience, with rhythm, and with reverence. And so, in these northern homes, warmth is made again and again, in the stitching of a mitten, high, in the gathering of wood, not for today, but for 2 weeks hence. In the quiet setting aside of the last, thickest blanket for the eldest among them. These are not grand gestures, but they are everything by now. You, too, are wrapped in a soft woolen cloak, heavier than expected, but comforting, like the weight of history itself. Your head rests near the low wall of turf and pine. The scents of the day smoke, broth, hide, hay, faded into one deep, earthy warmth. There is no light but that which lingers faintly from the coals, glowing like a forgotten star, tucked between the stones. You do not need to speak. The house does not ask for your voice. It only asks for stillness. And as you lie there, eyes closed, listening to the last breath of flame and the gentle rustle of wool as someone stirs in their sleep, you come to understand something quiet. Warmth is not only about fire, it is about closeness. It is about knowing how to be still beside others. It is about building a world not to impress, but to endure in the language of this house. Every gesture is a word, and every layer is a sentence. The story is not written, but worn. It is not sung, but spun. And, night after night, year after year, it continues without pause, without change, with only the gentle persistence of those who choose to stay warm together. You drift now, not alone, but among them. It is early again, though, in winter. Time stretches softly, with mornings and evenings often blending into one long, ash-colored hush. In the Viking longhouse, the day begins not with alarm, but with the soft clatter of stone lids, gentle creak of a wooden chest, and the scent of smoke coaxed into life. In the corner near the hearth, a woman kneels, brushing yesterday's ash from a wide, flat stone. Her hands move slowly, with the care of ritual rather than rush. Today, like so many days before, she will bake. This stone is not smooth. It is rough with years of use, blackened in places, flecked with crumbs and cinders from many loaves past. It sits slightly tilted, propped over a low bank of coals, with smaller stones wedged beneath one edge to control the heat. It is the heart of the Viking kitchen, though no one calls it that. It is not a room, but a zone of presence. There is no enclosed kitchen here. The very concept is unknown. Cooking is done in the open air of the longhouse, beside the same fire that gives warmth, near the benches where wool is spun and children sleep. There are no walls to divide aromas from conversation, no cabinets to close away tools. Everything used for cooking lies in view, hanging from beams, tucked in carved wooden boxes, stored in sacks, strung to rafters, or hung beside herbs, still drying in the smoky air. Flowers made from barley or rye, grown in short, stubborn fields during the long summer light. The grain is ground between two stones, one fixed, one moving, turned by hand in slow, careful circles. The result is coarse, uneven, and alive with scent. It smells faintly of sun-warmed husk and earth, even before it meets the heat of the fire. A wooden trough sits on the floor nearby, filled with this flour, touched by a pinch of salt from a leather pouch and a small scoop of soured milk left from the last churning. She mixes it with her hand, slowly letting it cling and fall between her fingers. The dough is not elastic, but thick, dense, something that must be shaped rather than kneaded. Her palms are strong from this work. She forms discs of it, no thicker than a finger, and dusts them lightly with ash before setting them carefully on the warm bread stone. There is no yeast, no rise. The bread is flat and crisp around the edges, soft in the center. When it cooks, it gives off a warm, nutty scent, curling through the air like a blanket. The sound it makes teeny pops and cracks is barely noticeable unless you are close, but here, near the hearth, it is part of the morning music. To her side sits a wooden box with a fitted lid, carved with spirals and dots. This is the butter box. It is packed with tightly sealed clay containers, each filled with butter churned weeks ago and buried in salt or packed in snow before being brought inside. It is not bright yellow, but pale, sometimes almost white, depending on the grazing of the cows. It smells faintly of grass and smoke, and when spread across a fresh disk of barley bread, it melts slowly, leaving behind a sheen rather than a drip. Cooking here is done not with recipes, but with memory. Every loaf is shaped from habit. Every pot is stirred with intuition. There are no exact measurements. A handful is understood by weight in the palm, a pinch by how much can be gripped without spilling. Meals are modest and rhythmic. They do not change with whim, but with season. In winter, the kitchen yields stews thick with root vegetables and dried fish, broths from bones simmered low for hours. Small cakes made from seed and honey, baked on stone, wrapped in leaves to be eaten later during work outside. The sweetness is faint, more of an echo than a burst. You notice how the tools themselves are worn with purpose. A ladle made from carved alder wood, darkened at the edge. Clay pot with a single chip, repaired with pitch. Stirring stick that has become polished from years of use. These are not clutter, they are companions. The light from the fire dances across these surfaces, casting gentle shadows. In the early haze, it is easy to believe that time is not passing, but layering new mornings atop old ones, each one tasting faintly of smoke and grain. The children, waking now, move slowly toward the hearth, guided not by command, but by scent. A girl of perhaps 5 presses her nose to the edge of the table, eyes wide as a fresh loaf is flipped. Her fingers hover, then retreat, respecting the heat. Another child hands her a small wooden plate, the edge smooth from years of use. She lays the bread upon it, and he retreats to a bench where his siblings sit in a row, legs tucked under thick tunics, waiting for the butter to arrive. Nothing is rushed. Nothing must be. Even the dogs lying near the back of the room, half in shadow, stir only slightly. They know this rhythm. They've smelled this bread 100 times. They know there will be crumbs. As you sit among them, the scene unfolds with a slow serenity. The roughness of the bread, the smoothness of the butter, the faint hiss of fire, and the soft tap of wood on stone. You realize that this is not a space of culinary invention. It is a space of continuity, where cooking is not performance, but preservation. And as the first disk of warm barley bread is handed to you wrapped loosely in a strip of linen to protect your fingers, you may find yourself wondering how many hands, across how many winters, performed this same quiet miracle of warmth, flour, and fire without ever writing it down. The act of cooking in a Viking longhouse is not separated from living. It unfolds in the same breath as spinning, storytelling, resting, and mending. There is no kitchen, no isolated space for preparation. It happens beside the fire, between footsteps, during conversations. And the tools that shape each meal are no more elaborate than the hands that guide them. Care, utility becomes tradition, and simplicity becomes ritual. You sit near the hearth, the flatbread in your lap, still warm through the cloth. The crust is gently scorched with a stone burned hotter. The center is soft, dense, and faintly sweet with the memory of the grain from which it was made. The butter spreads with effort, thick and cool, clinging to the rough surface. Scent is deep and subtle, part pasture, part smoke, part time. Nearby, the cook, whose movements are practiced but unhurried, has turned her attention to the stew. It has been simmering since dawn, a low, steady boil over the coals in a pot blackened by years of use. Inside are root vegetables saved from the summer cellar, turnips, parsnips, and thin strips of dried onion softened slowly into the broth. Pieces of dried cod, rehydrated overnight in a shallow bowl, have been added as well, breaking into white flakes that melt into the broth like snow, disappearing into soil. She stirs it with a spoon carved from birch, its handle worn smooth where her thumb rests. Occasionally, she lifts it to her lips, to taste, but to sense. The broth is not judged by flavor alone. It is assessed by warmth, thickness, scent, and sound. A stew should murmur, not bubble. A stew should fill the air without filling. The room, the breadstone, now lies empty. The loaves rest on a linen cloth folded atop a round table near the fire. Each is slightly different, one a bit darker, one flatter, one with a ridge where the dough cracked during cooking. These imperfections are not mistakes, they are signatures. No two loaves are expected to match, just as no two hands are the same. A child leans forward, eyes wide, watching the spoon circle the pot. She holds a wooden bowl in both hands, carved from a single knot of maple, its rim darkened and patched with a ring of sapseal where it once split. When the cook ladles stew into it, the child does not speak. She nods, steps back, and joins her siblings, who sit quietly on the floor in a circle, blowing gently on the steam. The floor beneath them is packed dirt, sometimes covered with woven reeds. Occasionally, a piece of bark or straw falls from the ceiling, carried by a draft or shaken loose by the shifting of rafters above. It is not dirty, it is alive. This is not a sterile space. It is a space of scent and warmth and quiet occupation. Hanging from the nearest rafter is a net of dried herbs and vegetables. You can make out thin slices of mushroom strung on twine and crisp at the edges. Bundles of dill, thyme, and juniper give off a faint green smell when warmed by the fire. A string of dried apples hangs near the wall, shriveled and dark, but still sweet to the taste, saved for rare treats or steeped into tea. Salt is kept in a small horn cup capped with beeswax. It's precious not because it is rare, but because it is vital. In the winter, food preservation depends on it. A piece of smoked lamb wrapped in cloth sits on a shelf above the hearth, awaiting the next stew or evening meal. Its surface is gray with ash and salt, but when sliced, the inside glows pink and fragrant, rich with the scent of summer smoke. The butter box, too, offers more than butter. Tucked beneath its larger pot is a small jar of soft cheese, tangy and thick, made from the last curdled milk of early autumn. It is mixed with herbs and a bit of honey, meant to be spread on bread when guests arrive, or when someone in the house needs comfort. It is not eaten quickly, it is treasured. There is no hurry in this place. Meals are prepared through the day, without rush or applause. People eat when the food is ready, not at a fixed hour. Some eat alone, quietly, but others eat in pairs or small groups. There is no ceremony. The act of eating is simply folded into the rhythm of the day, part of the weave of life that binds the house together. A young boy scrapes his bowl with a piece of flatbread, chasing the last of the stew from its curve. His fingers are red from the cold that creeps in near the door, and he holds the bread close to his lips, warming it with his breath before taking a final bite. His sister wipes her mouth with the edge of her sleeve. The mother leans back against the woodpile, hands resting on her apron, eyes closed, not in sleep, but in stillness. Nearby, a woman begins to prepare a drink for the evening. She fills a clay jug with water, then adds crushed juniper berries and dried mint. The jug is wrapped in wool and placed near the fire to steep. The result will be a soft, warming infusion, slightly bitter, slightly sweet, and kind to the stomach. It will be sipped slowly in the evening before sleep. Not because it is needed, but because it is known. You notice the way light moves here, not sharply, but in waves. It glows against the curve of the bread, pools in the hollow of the bowls, shimmers softly along the blackened rim of the pot. There are no shadows that startle, no flickers that surprise, only the gentle dance of flame and ember, reflected in the eyes of those who've lived this rhythm all their lives. And as you watch the steam rise, the bread cool, the hands move, and the fire settle, you may begin to understand. Cooking here is not performance, it is presence. It is a way of being in time, a way of anchoring each day in small, necessary acts. The taste of barley, the scent of onion, the weight of a spoon. It is the quiet miracle of turning what the earth gives, grain, root, herb, Asian, to something warm and sustaining. Evening returns slowly in the Viking longhouse, sliding across the sky like the hush of snow settling on wood. The firelight deepens, casting longer shadows that stretch toward the walls, weaving across the wool-covered shoulders of those gathered close. The scent of the stew lingers, now fading, replaced by the quiet aroma of juniper tea warming near the hearth. The breadstone lies cool again, flecked with flour, waiting for another morning. The last of the bowls have been emptied and stacked carefully near the butter box, their rounded bellies still warm to the touch. A young girl wipes the spoons, one by one, with a cloth dipped in snow melt and set by the fire to dry. She sings softly as she works, not a song with words, but a melody she's heard since before she could speak. It rises and falls like the wind between hills, soft as a whisper through pine. A man reclines nearby, one leg stretched, the other tucked beneath him. He is mending a handle on a cooking fork with thin strips of leather and pitch. His hands move. Without looking, the fork has served many winters, and if it holds another season, he will be content. The firelight glints off the iron tines, catching where the soot has worn away to show the dull gray of the metal beneath. On a shelf above the hearth, a ceramic jar rests beside a small cloth bundle. Inside the jar, pickled turnip, tangy and salt, sealed with beeswax. Inside the bundle, dried seaweed, pressed flat, salty with the memory of warmer tides. These small stores are not extravagant, but they are valuable reminders that preservation is as much a part of nourishment as the cooking itself. You watch as an older woman sits cross-legged on a thick woolen rug, spreading a paste of crushed nuts and honey across a cooled piece of bread. She eats slowly, savoring it, not for its sweetness, but for the texture of the way the nuts crunch. Between her teeth, the warmth of the grain still held in the bread's body. She does not speak. She simply chews, eyes half closed, as if listening to something within the wood. The butter box is now closed. Its lid fits snugly, carved to keep out the cold and the damp. It bears a single rune at the center, or Isla, the ancestral mark, a symbol of inheritance, not only of things, but of habits, of quiet, of rhythm. Within its walls lies not just food, but the effort of those who churned, salted, wrapped, tanned, stored, whose hands moved with quiet certainty, long before the snow began to fall. The bread stone, too, is part of this inheritance. It is not a thing of beauty. It is cracked at one corner. The edge is chipped, but those imperfections speak of hundreds of mornings, of heat and grain and ash, of meals shared by firelight, of sustenance given without flourish. Later, after the bowls have been put away and the cloaks drawn close, someone places a small sack of oats near the hearth to soak overnight for porridge. Another quiet act, made in the absence of instruction. It is done because it is always done. This is how tomorrow begins, in the quiet echo of today. A dog pads softly across the floor and lies down near the embers. His fur is dusted with ash. His nose rests on his front paws. Around him, the warmth of the fire still glows not as flame now, but as deep red coals, cradled in a bed of straw and stone. The cooking is done. The hunger, for now, is gone. Above, from a high hook, a leather pouch swings gently filled with dried herbs for broth, with bark for tea. Its motion is slow, stirred only by the rising heat. The walls, dark with smoke, seem to embrace the pouch and all within the room. The longhouse is not large, but it is vast in feeling. Every corner is full of use and memory. There are no decorations, yet nothing is bare. Everything serves. Everything remembers. Outside, the snow thickens, but you do not feel it. The insulation of turf and straw, the closeness of bodies, the fire at your side, and the food in your belly have created a circle of softness. You are not apart from the cold. You are protected from it, gently, by the simplest things: flour, fire, fat, and patience. There is no need to speak. No one fills the silence. In this house, silence is not emptiness. It is fullness that does not need to be named. 'Tis the pause between tasks, the breath after a good meal. It's telling of wool upon shoulders. A boy yawns near the door, his face smeared faintly with butter. A woman pulls him close, wraps him in a heavy cloak, and rests her hand on his back. They do not move again. The rhythm of their breath joins the others. The house breathes as one, and as your own eyes begin to close, lulled by the warm grain in your belly and the scent of juniper lingering on your fingertips, you may feel something ancient settle beside you. The quiet truth that food, when made with care, becomes more than sustenance. It becomes stillness. Cooking here is not loud. Cooking, it is not urgent. It is not performed. It is alive. It is held in the stone, in the wood, in the cloth-wrapped loaves that will be warmed again tomorrow. It is the gentle act of care repeated so often it becomes invisible, yet never forgotten, and you're wrapped in that same rhythm or part of it. Now, in the hush of the Viking world, where fjords met sky and winter cloaked the earth in silence, belief lived not in cathedrals or scrolls, but in the hands of the people. There were no sermons, no choirs, no golden idols. Instead, there were carvings, small, weathered pieces of wood or bone, tucked into satchels, tied to doorposts, or buried quietly beneath the hearthstones. Belief here was not declared. It was shaped. You awaken on a winter morning to the scent of smoke and the softness of wool, your breath rising like mist into the rafters. As your eyes adjust to the dim warmth of the longhouse, you notice a small figure on the shelf near your bed roll a human shape, not larger than your palm, carved from driftwood. Its face is worn, barely there. A circle for the head, 2 grooves for eyes, no mouth, no feet, but it stands bright, quiet, and present. This is not a toy, nor is it decoration. It is a god stick, or perhaps a spirit figure. No one calls it by the same name. It doesn't matter. It has been touched by hands that remember stories, shaped by fingers that carried both hunger and hope. It belongs to the rhythm of the household, not to the loud proclamations of doctrine. Belief in this place was woven into the very wood that warmed the fire, in the curling grain of ash branches bent into handles, in the bark scratched with runes and tucked into the beams above the door, in the fragments of whalebone carved with spirals and left near sleeping places, not for protection, but for presence. In this longhouse, stories are not preached, but passed. In the evening, when the last light fades and the coals are mounded, under ash for the night, a voice might rise near the hearth, not sharply, not to silence the room, but softly, like smoke rising upward. A story about the Allfather wandering as an old man in a gray cloak, or the goddess who wove fate beneath the roots of the great tree. The children listen without questions. The elders nod without comment. The words settle into the beams above, adding to what already lives there. You sit now near one of the low benches, where an older man scrapes a thin piece of bone with a stone tool. He does not look up. His fingers move with care. The bone is from a sheep slaughtered before the snow came, and is light, porous, and already pale from months of drying. He carves slowly, etching a long line first, then a circle, then a pattern of short strokes that form something like a tree, or perhaps a path. It is not clear, and he does not explain. Such objects are not made for display. They are held, sometimes worn, sometimes hidden. Some are tied with a strip of wool and hung from the neck, resting beneath the collarbone. Others are tucked into satchels or bound into the thatch above the sleeping bench. Their purpose is not to attract attention, but to remain. To be near the hearth, tucked into a crevice of stone, you notice a figure no larger than your thumb. It is carved from blackened wood, smooth with handling, and shaped like a horse, or perhaps a boar. Its back is arched, its legs stiff. It has no detail, no eyes, no mouth, no reins. Yet it holds something quiet within it. It was placed there long ago, and no one has moved it since. Its meaning may be known, or may have been forgotten. Still, it stays. The tools used for carving are simple: a piece of flint, a bone awl, a narrow knife. Some use the edge of a broken comb. Children sometimes imitate their elders, scratching shapes into bits of bark or charcoal on wood. No one stops them. These markings are part of learning, not just the technique, but the way belief is passed, not in instruction, but in doing. The figures carved are not always human. Some are shaped like ships, long and narrow, with curved lines for prows and slashes for shields. Others are round like the sun, with spokes like a wheel. Occasionally, a carving is made to resemble a wolf or raven, but never too detailed, never too lifelike. The point is not to replicate, but to hold an idea, a presence, a story in your hand. There is no pantheon carved in stone here, no great temples or shrines, but the gods are everywhere. In the patterns scratched into the cooking ladle, in the lines etched into the comb used for children's hair, in the figure tied to the beam above the door, where no one touches it, but everyone notices when it falls. The hearth itself may hold small tokens, bits of antler carved into coils, or bones not burned, set aside deliberately. Sometimes runes are whispered into the fire when new coals are digest sounds, syllables not for others to hear, only for the fire to carry that. And as you trace your fingers along the edge of a carved piece of birch left near your bed, you feel its texture smooth in places, rough in others. It is old. Someone made it before you. Someone shaped it, held it, carried it through many winters. You don't know what they asked of it. You don't need to. Carries their breath still. Belief here does not need clarity, does not need certainty. It needs only care to slow. Shaping of wood into meaning, the quiet offering of time, the act of holding something with both hands and listening to what it does not say. And as the longhouse settles again into silence, the fire dimming into red, the scent of pine smoke lingering in your hair, you are left with this quiet thought. Perhaps the gods are not in the sky or the sea, but in the grain of the wood, the curve of the bone, then the touch of the hands that remember. The man working near the fire pauses his carving only to warm his fingers against his palms. His hands are old, lined like tree bark, and his nails darkened from ash and time. He does not speak, but when asked, he will tell you the piece of bone he carves was taken from a ram sacrificed in midsummer, dried above the hearth, and saved for this quiet purpose. Hey, it is not a holy object in the way temples might claim holiness, but it holds something sacred in its making a stillness, tensioned around him. The longhouse continues its slow movement. Someone spins wool beside the window slit, a spindle bobbing like a slow pendulum. A child arranges firewood into a careful stack. A woman lays out dried herbs to crumble into cloth bundles. A tea, all of it is ordinary, yet none of it is meaningless. And above them, carved into the rafters themselves, are small runes, some clear, some fading. Most were carved during building or soon after. A date, perhaps, or a name, or a charm. No one reads them aloud. They simply remain. Not far from the hearth, a wooden staff leans against the wall. Its end is split slightly and bound with leather. Along its length are spiral notches, worn, almost smooth. This is not a walking stick, though it may once have been. It is a Vardlacher staff used not for striking, but for calling. Not loudly, not with the voice, but with the presence. It is said that when a woman holds this staff and sings softly near the fire, the spirits lessen not the angry ones, but the old ones, the deep ones, the quiet ones. Whether true or not, no one doubts the usefulness of singing near the fire. On a long night, the carvings in this house are not art in the way we might now think of it. They are not made for beauty, though some are beautiful. They are not made to impress. They are made because the hand must move and the spirit must be held. A figure carved into the leg of a stool, a horse scratched into the base of a bowl, a small spiral etched beneath the edge of a doorframe where no one sees it except those who kneel to scrub the floor. These are the quiet places where belief dwells. Sometimes a pouch is tied to a beam or hung above a door. It holds a handful of items, a piece of bark, a carved bone disc, a lock of hair from a firstborn son, a stone shaped like an eye. A bit of iron. The pouch may be opened once a year during the longest night or the return of the sun. Its contents are touched, rearranged, returned. No explanation is given. They simply are. One woman in the house wears a pendant simple disc carved from antler with a cross-marked center. It swings from a cord around her neck. She touches it, not out of habit, but out of memory. She says it was her mother's, and before that, her grandmother's, and before that, who knows? It was made during a spring flood, carved while waiting for the waters to recede. Its edges have been worn by breath and time. It is not magical, but she says it keeps her company. Outside, in the cold, belief takes other forms. At the edge of the field lies a cairn, a pile of stones, low and wide. It marks nothing official, but each stone has been placed by hand. When someone goes hunting or travels far, they add one, not to ask for safety, but to mark their passage. The pile grows slowly. It is said to hum in the wind, though that may be the stones shifting. Still, people listen. On the other side of the house, beside the doorway, a carved post stands upright. Its face is worn to a smooth shine. It bears the image of a man long-limbed, narrow-headed, with a hand raised in greeting. He is not named. Children sometimes touch his knee as they enter. Adults nod slightly as they pass. He does not answer, but he is never ignored. There are no formal rituals here, No shared prayers. The belief is scattered across the house like light through smoke. In every carved tool, in every shaped charm, the way water is poured with the left hand before bed. In the placing of ashes in a certain corner after the fire is swept. These actions are not enforced, but remembered. A grandmother did them. A neighbor did them. A spirit once smiled when it was done so. The gods themselves are not always named aloud. They are known by their acts, not their titles. The God who walks unseen, the one who gives wool, the one who steals fire, the one who waits in the woods but never harms the kind-hearted. These stories change from house to house, from fjord to fjord, but always they remain quiet, intimate, like the carvings themselves. Boy now takes up a small piece of birch and begins to carve. His knife is dull, his lines uneven. He is making a fish, or a bird, or a wolf. It is not clear. No one stops him. His father watches, but does not speak. Later, the figure will be tied to his belt, or left near the fire, or given to the child sleeping beside him. It will carry no grand meaning, but it will carry something. And perhaps that is the secret of these quiet carvings. Not that they speak to gods, but that they allow people to feel heard. In shaping wood, in smoothing bone, in placing a mark where it can rest unseen. They make space for something beyond themselves. You hold now a small disc carved from ash with a spiral etched deep into its surface. It fits your palm perfectly. You do not know who made it. You do not need to. It holds no power, but it holds a presence. It is not loud, not bright, not explained. It simply is. And in this longhouse, filled with warmth and silence, that is enough. As night falls fully upon the longhouse, the fire burns low and steady, its breath soft and golden. Outside, snow drapes the land like unspun wool, and the wind sings in tones too gentle to disturb. But then, the air thickens with the scent of pine, resin, wool, and smoke. It is in this softened hour, when the tools are set aside and hands come to rest, that the presence of belief is most clearly felt, not as a vision or a voice, but as a stillness that settles beside you like a familiar guest. The carved figures remain in their places, tucked beneath benches, tanaced on beams, cradled in folds of cloth. They do not glow, they do not move. Yet something in their worn surfaces, in the grooves made by patient hands, speaks quietly to those who pass them by. They are not worshipped, they are remembered. The disc in your palm has warmed with the heat of your body. Its spiral is smooth. Now beneath your thumb, its wood, polished by touch alone. You do not know its maker. It may have passed through several hands before yours. Perhaps it once rested in a bundle hung over a cradle. Perhaps it rode in the pouch of someone long gone. But now it rests with you. And that is enough. Above you, the beams of the longhouse stretch into darkness. A glint with faint carvings, tiny marks made with blades and memory. Some are runes, some merely shapes. A fish, a bird, a tree. Their meanings have faded or changed, but still they remain. The house does not forget. It holds every mark. A young woman passes by, her steps soft, her hair tied with a strip of linen dyed with crushed berries. At her waist, a small pouch swings. Gently, from it dangles a wooden figure, barely visibly curled snake or knotted tree. It sways as she moves, and though it makes no sound, it speaks of her grandmother, who taught her how to tie the cord just so. Not for luck, but for grounding. Not for faith, but for familiarity. Somewhere near the entrance, an elder prepares a small bowl of ashes mixed with melted snow. He dips his fingers in and makes a mark on the door frame, 3 lines, joined at the top, like a tent or a tree. This is not done every night. Only on nights when the snow falls thick and the fire burns low. No one asks why. No one tells him to. It has simply always been done. Nearby, a child sleeps with a carved wolf tucked beneath his blanket. The figure is rough, with one ear missing. Its eyes are too shallow dents. But it has weight. The child presses it to his chest as he dreams, and his breath is slow and sure. Belief here is not confined to moments of crisis or celebration. It weaves through the smallest things, in the way a spoon is placed on the table with its bowl facing east, in the single grain of salt sprinkled on new bread, in the hush that follows the telling of a story. These things are not questioned. They are done with care. And care is belief's quiet twin. The gods, if they dwell nearby, do not arrive with thunder. They rest in the objects made by hand, in the crack of a bone, smooth to shine, and the curve of a stick carved during snowfall, the way someone hums a tune older than memory while shaping a figure no taller than a thumb. These are not relics. They are continuities. Each one says, I was here. I cared. I remembered. In one corner of the house, beside the bundle of herbs tied for drying, lies a small chest. Inside are bits of carved wood, bone, antler. Some are broken. Some are missing parts. A woman opens the chest now and selects a disc marked with a single line. She presses it to her lips, then tucks it into the folds of her shawl. She does not explain. She does not need to. And outside, the snow continues to fall. You may ask yourself, quietly, without words, why these small carvings matter. Why something shaped from scrap, held in the palm, placed in the dark, could carry such meaning. But the answer lies not in the object, but in the time given to it, in the decision to make it at all. In the stillness it invites. Are not meant to command or control. They are meant to accompany, to reflect the rhythm of lives lived in softness, in slowness, in survival, as the fire settles into its night, posturcles buried in ash, flames reduced to the faintest flicker. Longhouse draws in its breath once more. Shadows lengthen, the rafters creak softly. The carved figures remain unmoved, unchanged. And yet everything they hold continues. The stories, the touches, the time, and as your own eyes begin to close, the warmth of the disc still in your hand, you are reminded that belief need not shout. It need not shine. It need not rise above the rooftops. Sometimes belief is simply carved into bone, into wood, into memory, and into the gentle rhythm of breath beside a winter fire. The cold in Viking lands arrives without warning, but it settles like an old companion, familiar, inescapable, and expected. It does not announce itself with storms or howls. It creeps in, softly, settling on beams and shoulders, wrapping its fingers around doors and hearts. And in response, the people of the Longhouse do not shiver. They dress to dress in winter. Here is not simply to cover the body. It is a daily ritual, crafted over years, passed down through hands that have stitched in silence by firelight and worn cloth until it faded into memory. Each layer is a story, each fur a season, each thread a piece of the landscape woven with care. As the pale morning arrives, the Longhouse wakes slowly. The first to stir sits by the hearth, stirring embers back to life. The second rises too, pull a tunic over their shoulders. It is wool-thick, coarse, slightly stiff with cold but once worn. It begins to warm to the shape of the body, like water meeting the inside of a cup. This is the base, the first line against the wind. Wool, spun from the hardy sheep of northern fields, is the foundation. The outer layer repels moisture, while the softer underlayer traps warmth close to the skin. Tunics are cut long, often to the knees or below, and may be slit at the sides for ease of movement. They are rarely dyed in winter color, fades too quickly in the cold, and instead appear in shades of smoke, oil, and ash, grays, browns, and dull greens that blend with the season itself. Over the tunic. Second garment is drawn a heavier woolen overtunic or cloak, often lined with fur. The most common is sheepskin, but those who travel or herd may wear fox, rabbit, or marten fur, sewn carefully with sinew and lined with linen to ease the itch. The cloaks are fastened at the shoulder with a brooch, sometimes bronze, sometimes bone, each with its own pattern, passed down or bartered. A woman lifts a folded cloak from a chest near the hearth. It is wrapped in linen and smells faintly of dried thyme and smoke. She shakes it out and drapes it over her shoulders, pinning it with a disc brooch engraved with interlocking rings. The metal is dull, worn smooth at the edges, but it catches the firelight for just a moment as she bends to lace her boots. Boots are made from reindeer hide or thick goat leather, tanned with brains and bark, softened by hand. They are stuffed with dried moss or sheep's wool for insulation and laced high to protect against drifting snow. The laces are often narrow strips of leather, crisscrossed tightly and tied at the side. No one knots at the front knots. Catch snow and freeze. It is a small detail learned by repetition. Children dress with help. Their tunics are smaller versions of adult ones, though often lined with extra wool. Their hands are slipped into mittens felted from wool, soaked, boiled, and compressed until dense enough to block wind. The mittens have no fingers. One pocket for the thumb, the rest for warmth. No embroidery, only the occasional colored thread stitched at the cuff to mark whose is whose. Hoods are drawn over heads next, made from multiple panels of wool, stitched together with long, slanted seams. These hoods curve around the neck and shoulders, keeping the wind from slipping inside. Some are fur-lined, the edge brushed with down or ringed with the soft feathers of ptarmigan, caught in summer and saved for such uses. Inside the longhouse, people move slowly as they dress. There is no rush. The cold will wait. It does not come and lingers. Clothing is adjusted layer by layer. A strap is tightened. A belt is buckled. Scarf is wrapped around the mouth, tied at the nape of the neck. Each step is remembered, not in thought, but in motion. Belts are more than decoration. They hold knives, pouches, fire starters. A woolen pouch may carry dried berries, a sliver of soap, or a carved token for good weather. A man's belt might also carry a spindle or sewing needle tucked into a horn case. Everyone repairs their own clothes. A tear must not wait. Overtrousers made of thick wool are pulled on last, sometimes lined with fur at the thighs and knees. The outer seams are stitched outward so snow can be brushed away before it melts. Beneath, linen underwraps are layered around legs in tight spirals like bandages or bindings from protection from chafing at the door. A woman fastens a strip of bark over the tops of her boots. This is birch, softened in water, then wrapped with a cord. It is not for fashion. It stops snow from falling between boot and trouser, especially during travel. Her fingers move quickly. The habit is old. Outside, the air is still. Snowflakes hover, falling so slowly they appear to float. The woman steps out into the light, her cloak drawn close, her breath rising before her. Behind her, others prepare. The door will not stay open long. Each person who steps out today does so wrapped in layers shaped not only by weather, but by ancestry. The wool was spun in summer. The furs were dried in autumn. The cloaks were mended before the first frost. Every thread has known firelight, hands, time, and as you sit near the hearth, watching them move, each bundled in shape, shadow, silent, you begin to understand that dressing here is not a shield against winter. It is a conversation with it, a way of meeting the cold, not with resistance, but with readiness. You hold a tunic, now coarse and plain, but lined with warmth. It smells of lanolin and smoke. As you slip it over your head, its weight settles around you like a story. And you find yourself wondering, how many winters has this tunic known? How many shoulders has it warmed? How many mornings has it risen from a chest near a fire, ready to meet the frost again? The layering of clothing in the Viking winter is a conversation, not only with the weather, but with memory. Each article has been shaped by use, mended by hand, and softened by years of wear. These garments are not new, They are old, friends trusted, adjusted, reshaped over seasons like stones in a riverbed, bearing quiet witness to those who wore them before in one corner of a longhouse. A woman kneels near a folded bundle of garments, untying the simple cord that holds them together. She lifts each piece gently, shaking off the dust of stillness. First a thick linen underdress, then a woolen apron dress with side panels. The wool is slightly mottled, its dyes faded to a quiet brown, but the seams are strong. Arms through the sleeves with the ease of long habit, wrapping a narrow belt at her waist to draw the layers close. The belt is made from braided nettle fibers, its ends tied with a twist of red wool, just a touch of color, like a memory pressed into the thread. She picks up her outer cloak, lined with rabbit fur, patched with wool at the shoulders where it is worn thin. The patching thread does not match. It is a brighter gray. Someone else's hand once mended this place. Her mother, perhaps, or sister, or the friend who lent her the cloak. The winter her own was ruined by rain. That small contrast in fabric carries no shame. It carries history. Beside her, a young boy is wrapping his legs in woolen leg bindings, called vaff. He leans forward, circling the cloth, stripped down his shin with careful tugs, keeping the edges smooth and tight. Each wrap overlaps the next, anchoring warmth against his skin. The wool is coarse and striped faintly with darker fiber. These bindings once belonged to someone taller, but they have been cut shorter and hemmed roughly. They work just the same. He ties the end beneath his knee and slips his feet into boots lined with reindeer fur. The boots creak faintly at the seams, leather, dried and softened again, season after season. He tugs at the ankle straps, then rubs beeswax across the seams to help repel moisture. The wax carries the scent of summer, locked away in its golden mask. That the older man nearby wears trousers of thick felted wool, nearly black with age, stitched in long lines down the sides with red thread. Not for fashion, but for strength. Reinforcing a seam takes time and care. The thread may fray, but the line remains. He adjusts his tunic, then wraps a short length of fur around his neck, tucking the ends into the collar. No button holds it, just fold and friction. Fur plays many roles in the Viking winter, each chosen with thought. Fox fur is soft, warm, and supple. It lines hoods and collars. Marten is finer, used for trim or mitten cuffs. Bear fur is dense and heavy, used for sleeping cloaks or thick boots. Wolf, though rare, is used with reverence. Often, its pelt is shared among familia strip for each generation. It carries more than warmth, carries protection, though no one quite says from what. The garments are never just for outside. The cold creeps in even here. People wear their full layers indoors, shedding only mittens and boots. Cloaks are drawn aside, but not removed. The longhouse is warm enough to sit, but not to stand still for long. The fire gives light and breath, but not heat for luxury. Its warmth must be worn. Each piece of clothing bears signs of the land. Reindeer hide smells faintly of smoke and musk. Wool carries the tang of sheep and lanolin, spun from flax harvested. In late summer, smells of earth and damp fields. These scents are not unpleasant. They are the perfume of survival. Together, They shape the atmosphere of the room. Warm, thick, real. Mending is a daily act. Wool splits, leather cracks, threads pull loose. Every evening, near the fire, someone sews. Not all are women. A father may mend his son's glove while the child sleeps. A sister may patch a brother's boot lining while he finishes the stew. Small bone needles, sharp and polished, pass between hands. A length of woolen thread is softened by running it through beeswax. Stitches are neat, but never perfect. The point is not beauty. The point is endurance. Dyes are rare in winter, but when used, they speak. A splash of blue from woad along the cuff. A band of green around the collar from birch leaves stored from spring. Dull red from madder root gathered before frost. These colors do not shout. They whisper of hands who took time to prepare, to color, to brighten the gray world even slightly. Children's clothes carry the most patches. Knees tear, sleeves fray. Growth demands constant adjustment. A tunic is passed down 3 times, with hems let out, sleeves extended with new bands. In one corner, a small cloak hangs from a peg, its edges uneven, stitched with mismatched wool. A child reaches for it, pulling it over her shoulders with practiced ease. It drags slightly at her heels. It once belonged to her cousin, now gone to another village. She does not mind. It is warm and still, more layers. A woolen scarf tucked at the throat. A cap pulled low over the ears, tied beneath the chin. A second pair of mittens worn over the first 2 layers of felt, held together with a strip of deer hide. Outside, a light wind lifts the snow in small eddies. The trees sway just enough to whisper, and still, no one rushes. Dressing well is not hasted, it's practice, okay? An understanding of how to meet the world on its own terms. How to layer not just fabric, but thought and care. As you watch this quiet ritual unfold, the folding, the wrapping, the tying, you begin to see dressing, not as function, but as memory. These garments are not just coverings, they are continuity. To wear them is to remember all the winters before. It's the hands who spun the thread, the fingers who tied the knot. It's the quiet choices that said, again and again, we will face this season together. And in that slow act of putting on warmth, the cold is not conquered, but joined. Not feared, but met by evening. The longhouse glows faintly with firelight and wool. The layers once carefully donned in mourning remain wrapped around shoulders and legs, though now loosened just slightly at the seams. Hood lowered, a belt set aside. Yet the warmth is not surrendered. It lingers in the fabric, in the body, in the stillness of breath that fills the space between conversations. Near the hearth, boots dry slowly, propped beside the stones. The scent of damp leather and faint animal oil mingles with the fragrance of pine smoke and barley stew. A fur-lined glove lies open on a bench, its fingers curled upward like a sleeping hand. The wool inside has been compressed by days of use, shaped to the form of the wearer, like a memory pressed into cloth. Dressing for winter, here, is not undone all at once. Layers are peeled back gently, with respect for what they have endured. A woman sets her outer cloak over a rafter beam, where the heat from the fire will reach it by morning. She brushes snow from the hem before folding it, not hurriedly, but with the care of one folding a blanket over a child. The garments are never merely tools. Each piece is part of a quiet choreography that stretches back generations. A child's mittens, repaired once again at the thumb. A man's woolen trousers, now patched at the knee with a square cut from an old cloak. A woman's linen underdress, faded but whole, hand-washed and laid to dry near the fire each 7th day in the sleeping corner. An elder wraps herself in a bare fur cloak. It is lined with wool, too heavy to wear while walking, but perfect for rest. The fur crackles faintly as she settles beneath it, and the sound, familiar and low, fills the silence with reassurance. A strip of fox fur lies across her shoulders, tied loosely beneath her chin. She keeps it on through the night, even in sleep. There is no shame in the age of clothing here, okay? In fact, its wear is a kind of wisdom. The most cherished cloaks are often the most patched. A hood that has seen 20 winters carries more value than one newly sewn. New garments are crisp, stiff, full of potential. Old ones are soft, dependable, known. Near the wall, a boy folds his trousers, then rolls them tightly into a wool sack. He places the sack beneath his head as a pillow, a small luxury, one that smells of lanolin and earth and wind. His cloak, still dusted with snow, is draped over his shoulders like a second blanket. He does not remove it. He will sleep in it, as he always does. Its weight is comfort. The longhouse does not grow warm in the way of modern homes. The fire does not chase the chill away completely. The layers of fur and wool, the careful wrapping of linen and hide, allow each person to carry warmth with them, to create it, hold it, share it. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, the garments themselves seem to breathe. A mitten sags softly where it was hung. A sleeve falls forward on the bench, as if reaching. A boot leans gently to one side, toe pointing toward the fire. Dressing in winter is not just survival. It is a ritual of belonging, a gesture of rootedness. Each morning that begins with wool and bone clasp, each evening that ends with fur and fire, is a declaration not shouted, but whispered. We remain, and still the snow falls outside, gently, steadily, a fine powder, almost invisible, collecting along the roof, across the lintel, along the edges of every beam. Someone rises to stoke the fire, wrapped still in cloak and hood. They move slowly, mindful not to disturb the hush that now blankets the room. They kneel, lift a log, place it upon the coals, a soft hiss, a crack, a glow. The light stirs the cloaks draped on pegs. Their shadows stretch a little longer along the walls. These garments, these layers, do not speak, but they hold stories. They remember days spent walking frozen paths, nights sitting under stars, mornings beside cracked ice. Each piece, made or mended or gifted, carries not just warmth, but witness. A child murmurs in sleep, tugging their cloak tighter. A mother adjusts her shawl, drawing it across her chest with one slow motion. A man wraps his hands inside his tunic, pressing palms to ribs. No one complains, no one rushes. The warmth is in the stillness, and as your own body begins to sink into sleep, wrapped in wool that scratches slightly at the collar and smells faintly of smoke and sun-dried grass, you feel not only comfort, but continuity. You are wrapped not just in fabric, but in time. To dress in a Viking winter is to be part of something quiet and long. Something passed hand to hand, stitch to stitch, without the need for words. And in this stillness, as the fire fades to ember, and breath slows to silence, you realize warmth is not worn. Warmth is remembered, and tonight, you are part of that memory. The hearth in a Viking longhouse is not only a place of warmth, it is a place of rhythm, of making, of transformation. Though the fire offers heat and light, quiet it is the space around the hearth, the quiet arc of stones. The hard-packed earth where shadows gather that becomes the workshop of hands. Here, Viking women sit, not to idle, but to spin. The fire crackles gently, and from their fingers comes the thread that weaves the home together, literally and quietly. One spindle, turn at a time. You sit now in that warm circle. The coals glow softly, a low red beneath the blackened iron pot. The scent of broth lingers in the air, barley and onion, but the meal has long since been eaten. In its place comes the soft sound of wool being drawn, twisted, spun. The dropped spindle turns with slow precision, its motion gentle and pendulous, like a leaf caught in wind. In the hand of the woman nearest the fire, a puff of carded fleece becomes thread, and the thread becomes purpose. There is no rush here, no chatter. The room breathes slowly, in time with the fire. Each flick of the spindle is matched by the turn of a wrist, the pull of fingers, the twist of soft fiber into form. The wool is drawn from a basket of unspun fleece, washed but not dyed, its lanolin still faintly clinging to the strands. It smells of sheep and smoke of field, inflamed. Its texture changes with the light. Spinning is not an event. It is a presence. Women do it while listening, while watching, while waiting for the stew to boil. It is the labor between labors, the creation that continues after the tasks of the day have quieted. Children may be asleep on the bench nearby. The husband might be mending a fishing line at the far wall. Yet here, in this circle of women, thread is born. In the quiet strength of the household grows. The spindle is simplistic in a weight. Sometimes the whirl is carved wood. Sometimes it is clay or bone. It turns with the pull of gravity and the memory of the fingers that guide it. Some spin standing, Others sit on stools or the floor, cloaks wrapped about their shoulders, eyes watching both the thread and the firelight that dances along it. No pattern is written, no words are spoken. Each thread is made by field tension, judged by fingertip, twist by glance, strength by the quiet hum it makes as it unspools. The thread may be fine or thick, rough or smooth. It depends not on preference, but on purpose. Coarse thread for warp, soft thread for weft, a heavy ply for boot soles, a finer one for undergarments. Each is planned in the hands, not the mind. As the night deepens, the fire throws longer shadows. One woman reaches for her distaff, smooth branch, forked at the end, where the carded wool is held like a cloud. She tucks it beneath her arm, steadying it with the curve of her elbow. With her free hand, she draws the wool, teasing it into a loose ribbon before allowing the spindle to take it. The motion is slow, familiar. The sound, barely a whisper just. The hush of fiber twisting into thread. The women do not always look at what they make. Their eyes rest on the fire, or on each other, or drift toward the ceiling where smoke curls into the rafters. Yet their hands never falter. Thread forms steadily, growing longer, curling around the spindle's shaft in neat spirals. Beside the hearth, a child stirs. He watches the spinning with one eye open, then tucks his hand beneath the woolen blanket and drifts back into sleep. This rhythm has lulled him since birth. The sound of thread being made is a lullaby all its own. Not far away, in the corner near the woodpile, another woman begins winding her finished thread into a ball. She lifts the spindle, full now with pale gray yarn, and unwinds it gently, turning it into a soft sphere she places in a cloth-lined basket. This thread may become a cloak next season, or socks, or the warp of a woven wall hanging meant to keep the cold from creeping through the boards. Its future is not spoken, only understood. The thread made here will be dyed in spring, with lichens and leaves and bark. It will be softened in the river, hung to dry on birch branches, then returned to the loom when the light grows longer. For now, in winter, in this quiet hour after stew and before sleep, it is simply made spun from memory, from rhythm, from care. A pot nearby holds soapwort boiled down to a thick paste, used to clean the wool after spinning. It smells faintly of mint and earth. The bowl beside it holds grease made from goose fat, sometimes rubbed into the spindle shaft to keep it turning smoothly. These small details live at the edges of the hearth, part of the process, but never interrupting it. The fire shifts, a log settles, sparks lift and fade. The women pause only to draw their cloaks tighter, then continue. Spindle, twist, pull, wind, a simple sequence, repeated into the dark. And as you watch the thread grow between wool and spindle, you begin to understand something ancient, that spinning is not only the making of cloth, it is the making of patience, of continuity, of quiet creation beneath the roof that shelters every other act. The hearth warms the hands, yes, but it also warms the thread, and the thread warms the home. The work of spinning continues into the depth of evening, uninterrupted by conversation, sustained by presence. In the Viking longhouse, no one calls it labor. It is simply what is done when the hands are free and the fire is warm. The rhythm of the spindle fills the silence, not with sound, but with motion. Round and round it turns low, pendulous, calming, always returning to the same path, always answering gravity with grace. By now, several women are spinning side by side. Their knees almost touch as they sit on small wooden stools padded with fleece, their cloaks drawn loosely around their shoulders. One spins with a spindle made of antler and carved with a spiral, worn smooth from years of use. Another uses a whirl of clay, faintly cracked but still balanced. These are tools passed down not for display, not even named, but remembered by feel in the hand. The wool has changed slightly. Earlier in the day, it was a soft gray fleece. Now it is darker, almost brown, with a coarser texture, suited for outerwear or rug yarn. A large basket holds several small skeins already finished, wound into tight balls. They are not labeled. The hands that spun them remember each by weight, by scent. By the way, the fiber curled under tension. A younger girl, perhaps 12, sits nearby, carding fresh wool with a pair of combs. The tools are simple. 2 wooden paddles with rows of metal teeth rubbed together with short, practiced strokes. She moves slowly, but with care, drawing the fiber back and forth until it lies in long, fluffy rolls, aligned and soft. Her cheeks are pink with warmth and focus. She does not yet spin, but she prepares. And that, too, is part of the thread's life. Another woman, older, with silver braided into her hair, spins without even glancing down. Her eyes are fixed on the fire, but her fingers work with quiet certainty. Her thread is fine, so fine it glistens slightly in the firelight. She is spinning for a shirt, perhaps, or a kerchief, something to be worn close to the skin. The fibers pass through her fingers like breath. She murmurs something, not to anyone else, but to herself. A counting, maybe, or a memory. Thread, here, is spun not just for clothing, but for bindings, for nets, for the seams of leather boots and the drawstrings of pouches. Some is twisted into thicker cords, used for suspending pots above the fire or tying bundles of herbs beneath the roof beams. It is the quiet infrastructure of the household, the part that touches everything but asks for no attention. Spindles rest briefly on the floor as women stand to stretch. Walking slowly around the fire, one adjusts the cloak on a sleeping child. Another pokes at the coals, adding a single log and watching the flames renew themselves with a flicker of orange. The fire is not for heat alone. It is part of the spinning. Light shows the fibers clearly. The warmth keeps the fingers supple. The air, rich with wood smoke, settles softly into the wool, stinting it with memory. A baby stirs on a nearby bench, half wrapped in a length of dyed wool, woven the previous year. The colors are muted, earthy, green, and faded rust, patterned in simple diamonds. A mother rises, lifts the child gently, and settles back down with him in her lap. She begins to spin again, one hand guiding the spindle while the other steadies the sleepy weight of her son. The motion of the tool continues, undisturbed. Life folds into work, and work into rest. Not far from the hearth, a loom leans against the far wall. It stands silent for Naut's warp threads covered with cloth to keep dust away. The weaving is done during daylight, when hands can see every alignment, but it waits, ready, The thread spun tonight will join that warp soon. One thread among many, wrapped into pattern, into blanket, into time. The air thickens with the soft weight of night. P. The shadows on the beams above stretch and blur. P. The fire dims, but still glows. One woman now spins more slowly, her spindle heavier, her wool thicker. She's making rope for the sled bindings. It does not need to be fine. It needs to hold. She twists 2 threads together, finger over finger, then winds the doubled line onto a longer rod beside her stool. The rope is firm, evenly spaced. It will be soaked in tallow, then dried to keep it from fraying in snow. Even here, in this circle of thread, the preparation for travel begins out above them. Bundles of wool hang from the rafters, each tied with string, each labeled with a single wooden bead carved with a rune. Some will be spun tomorrow. Others will wait until spring. Still others will be traded for salt or iron or honey. Nothing is wasted. Even the smallest tuft left over is gathered in a pouch, used to stuff mittens or patch seams. One woman pauses to examine a break in her thread. It snapped as she spun. Too much tension at the wrong moment. She knots it again, carefully. The knot is small, invisible, once woven, but it is there, a tiny record of interruption, of correction, of care. And as she spins once more, drawing the wool with slow fingers, you begin to see the deeper rhythm, that this is not simply the making of fabric, but the mending of time. That each thread, drawn slowly from fleece by firelight, is a kind of continuity, a way to link the past and the future through something soft and strong and quiet. The spindle turns, the thread lengthens, the hearth glows, and the world, for now, is held together by hands and fiber and flame. The night has deepened. Outside, the cold winds have settled into silence, and a fine frost glimmers faintly beneath the distant stars, though no one is watching. Within the longhouse, the world has grown smaller, wrapped in wool and shadow, and the smell of ancient timber warmed by fire. The spinning has slowed. Some hands now rest in their laps, spindles still between their fingers, threads dangling loosely, like the last thought before sleep. Others wind up their finished yarn, tucking it into woven bags, marking its length and weight only in memory. There are no ledgers here. The tally lives in the body, in the tired fingers, in the eyes rubbed with smoke, in the feel of fullness after labor done quietly. One by one, the women rise. They shake out their cloaks, fold their tools into cloth wraps, and stretch softly by the fire's side. Few murmur blessings over their wool, simple words, old and slow, meant not for magic, but for continuity. These are not prayers to be heard. They are gestures that hold the thread between the past and the next day. The girl who had been carding wool has fallen asleep on her stool. Someone lifts her gently and lays her beside a folded tunic, wrapping her in a woolen shawl that smells of lanolin and sun. Her hands, even in sleep, are curled as if still combing. Fleece, the old woman with silver in her braid, stands last. She places her spindle beside a pile of soft, pale yarn and sits quietly for a long moment. The fire glows on her face, lines deep with time and soot. Gaze is steady, not wistful, not weary, just still. She does not speak. She only watches the low orange light fold back into the hearthstones. Like a closing eye, you begin to notice the things that remain. A woven band looped over a roof beam, swaying ever so slightly with the house's breathing. A pair of mittens tucked beside the fire, their cuffs frayed but mended. A spindle placed neatly upon a carved shelf, flanked by 2 bundles of unspun wool. They seem like ordinary things, but they are not forgotten. Each one holds a season of waiting, a quiet hour by the fire, 1,000 turns of the hand. In time, the longhouse returns to stillness, not silence, for the silence was always there underneath, but the stillness that comes only when every task has been set down with care. Now, if you lie still, you can feel the weight of that stillness pressing into the wool beneath you. It is not heavy, it is anchoring. It's like the soft closing of a loom's heedle, like the breath before a story begins again tomorrow. Wool, in this place, is not simply a material, it is a bridge. It carries memory and utility in the same fiber. It wraps babies and tools, cradles, spoons, and shoulders alike. Aligns the boots of farmers and the burial clothes of the old. It is never loud, never urgent, but it is everywhere, holding, binding, remembering as your mind drifts. You might find yourself imagining the wool from today's spinning coiled gently in baskets, waiting for light. You might imagine the warmth it will carry next year, the footprints it will protect from the frost, the children it will comfort during the next long winter's wind. You might even imagine, softly, that you are part of this thread, that your stillness, too, has been folded into the rhythm. And in that thought, quiet as a breath beneath fur, you find the closing of the day. No great moment, no final act. Only a house returning to sleep. Only the thread spun, remembered, and waiting in the long hush of northern winter. When the days shrink into pale gray slivers and the air grows too still to speak, the Viking household turns inward. The world beyond the walls lies silent, blanketed in snow, and the paths to the fjord are iced over. But within the longhouse, the memory of sunlight lingers in the form of food, prepared and stored with quiet care through the seasons past. This story begins not in hunger, but in preservation, in the artful rituals that kept meals possible long after the fields had faded and the smoke from summer fires had drifted into the sky. The taste of winter for the Viking family was not one of fresh harvest, but of things kept wisely, dried, fish curled like paper scrolls, cheese hardened to the texture of smooth stone, smoked meat, dark with alder wood, hanging above the hearth. Each flavor carried not only nourishment, but memory. The hearth crackles quietly now, its fire lower than usual, carefully fed with small pieces of wood. A pot hangs suspended above the embers. Inside, a broth simmers slowly, pale, fatty, and fragrant with onions grown months ago. Its steam rises in soft curls, twisting gently in the cold air. On a low wooden bench beside it sits a row of small ceramic bowls, each filled with something preserved. One holds dried mushrooms, wrinkled and deep brown. Another contains sour curds, sharp on the tongue. A third is filled with crushed berries, turned nearly black with age. Their sweetness quieted, but not lost. The longhouse smells of smoke, wood, and faint vinegar. It is not unpleasant. It is the smell of endurance, pure, edible patience. Near the hearth, you might notice a rack built from curved pine branches. Strung along its length are small cloth bundles tied with wool string. These are not for decoration. They are stores of herbs and roots angelica, lovage, and bits of wild garlic gathered during the warmer months, which is dried carefully, crumbled by hand, and folded into rough linen. The bundles swing gently as someone passes, releasing the soft scent of earth and bitter leaf. In the colder corner of the longhouse, away from the fire's warmth, sits a stone-lined pit sunk into the ground, covered with a thick slab of wood and sealed with clay around its edge. It holds a secret. Beneath it, buried in layers of ice and straw, rest precious items wrapped in animal hide, slabs of butter packed in birch bark, a few last carrots, and perhaps a small piece of dried whale blubber. These are not taken out lightly. Each visit to this cold cache is a decision made with care. How much can be spared? How much must remain for the darker days yet to come? A boy crouches beside the sealed pit, his breath visible in the cold. He presses his ear to the lid and knocks gently, not to listen, but out of habit. The sound it gives back is dull, frozen. Satisfied, he returns to his seat, drawing his cloak tighter around his shoulders. He knows the pit is sealed well. He helped pack the straw. Above the rafters, nearer the roof where heat and smoke rise, hang rows of fish and meat. They are strung, with care, evenly spaced to allow the smoke to kiss each one in turn. The fish, mostly herring and trout, have curled into themselves, silver skin turned matte and leathery. The meat, tougher and darker, still drips slowly into a trough below, its salt drawing out the last moisture. The room carries their scent, savory, deep, never overpowering. Just a hint of what's to come. Preserving food in this world is not a convenience, it is a necessity drawn from centuries of experiment, intuition, and repetition. Salt, when it can be traded for, is precious. Smoke is plentiful. Ice, of course, is free, but unpredictable. So the Viking family learns to use all three in quiet concert. A leg of lamb might be brined first, then smoked, then hung. Fish might be gutted, rolled in ash, and pressed between stones. Milk might be left in a covered bowl beside the fire, turned into a thick, sour substance that no longer spoils but strengthens. A woman kneels beside a wooden tub, her sleeves rolled up despite the chill. She is scraping the skin off dried turnips with a bone-handled blade. They are to be boiled this evening, sliced thin and steeped in broth. As she works, she hums softly. Not a song, exactly, but a rhythm, something older than memory, passed through repetition rather than tune. Nearby, a child reaches into a carved horn and pulls out a piece of dried apple. It is leathery and thin, but when he chews it, the taste is sweet, concentrated. A quiet reminder of the orchard trees now sleeping beneath snow. He smiles without thinking. The apple is from last summer. Some mother had sliced them and hung them over the stove. He remembers the rows of fruit spinning slightly when someone walked past them. These, slicing, salting, hanging, drying may seem mundane, but they are a kind of seasonal storytelling, a way of carrying warmth forward. Each flavor contains a memory. Each preparation is a quiet promise to the body. You will not go hungry. You will last until the light returns. As the pot over the fire reaches its fullness, the broth's scent thickens. Someone ladles it into a wooden cup, passes it to another. The steam curls upward. They drink slowly, the warmth moving from tongue to chest to fingertips. Outside, the snow presses close against the walls of the house. But within, there is taste and warmth and memory, preserved not in haste, but in care. And the quiet flavors of winter continue to unfold in the stillness of midwinter, when the wind moves like a whisper and the sky remains the color of worn iron. The preservation of food becomes more than preparation, it becomes tradition. Each technique passed quietly from one set of hands to the next, like the sharing of fire itself. Every household in a Viking settlement might have slight variations. Some favored birch for smoke, others preferred juniper. One family salted their fish longer, another let their cheese age nearly until spring, but all were bound by a common thread, the knowledge that food, to last, must be treated not only with care, but with time. Now, as the longhouse breathes its warm rhythm, let us turn to the smokehouse, a separate structure not far from the main dwelling. Its walls are thick with soot, and the air inside is dense, sharp with attempts of smoked alder and aging meat. Hanging from the beams above are sides of pork, slabs of whale meat, and long ropes of sausage, coiled like sleeping snakes. Some of these have been hanging for weeks, others for months. The color has darkened to a deep, almost black sheen, and the surface is firm under the fingers. A man moves through the low smoke with practiced ease. His fur-lined hood is pulled low, his boots padded with straw. He gently tests each hanging piece, pressing lightly with his thumbs, tapping the wooden pegs for strength. Nothing is rushed. These meats will not spoil if watched properly, will last through hunger and thaw alike. He rubs a spot with a cloth, checking for mold, checking for softness. All is well. Back in the longhouse, his daughter grinds salt with the smooth stone into a cracked wooden bowl. The salt had come by boat, traded for wool and iron. It is coarse and gray and carries the scent of the sea. She adds dried rosemary and ash into the mixture, then pats it carefully around small chunks of pork belly. She places the salted meat in a clay jar and presses a flat stone lid on top. It will sit undisturbed for 3 weeks near the cool wall.